So buy yourself a D whistle. You can play in D, G, A major, all the relative minors, really everything you're going to need to play Irish traditional music.
How do you play the song in B flat?
Why do you want to play in B flat?
Because that's what key it's in.
Well, you can play any song in any key that you want to. Are you playing by yourself? Or are you playing with a group? Or
By myself.
then what difference does it make what key you're in?
Because that's what key it's in.
I've had this conversation about 100,000 times. I've had folks ask me about whistle keys and transposition, and I've mentioned it, and I've at least touched on it a few times in different videos, but I've never dedicated a whole video just to that. So here we are. First of all, some basics, some terminology, just so we're all on the same page. Keep in mind this is not intro to music theory. What is a key? We're not kind of talking at that level. Number one, I'm not qualified to break that down. And number two, this would be a very long video if we had to go that route. Hopefully we're all at least at some basic understanding of what makes a song or a tune in a particular key, so we don't have to dive into that. And really what we're talking about is whistle keys. So why do we call this a D whistle? Why is this the whistle everybody says you should get first? Well, first of all, we're calling it a D whistle because we're judging it based on the lowest note that we can play. And in this case, the lowest note here is the note D. You'd also call that the tonic in the scale of D, or the one. Sometimes you can refer to that a few different ways. So in the scale of D, that's where we're in here. This lowest note is the note D. We just need some sort of frame of reference, and that's how some wise person decided to do it way back when, is that we're just starting with the lowest note. You can also measure by really any note you choose, but that's how it's kind of been established in the Irish traditional music world, in the tin whistle, Irish flute world at least. With this whistle, you can play about 95% of all Irish traditional tunes. And that is not by accident. The tunes are written in keys that this whistle, the Highland pipes, the Irish flute, systems that are built in this kind of a concept from a physics standpoint, keys that those instruments can play in. Now, obviously not every tune in Irish traditional music is in the key of D. That would get a little tiresome, I imagine. But the nice thing about this is that you're not limited to that one key. That's how we describe the whistle, a D whistle, but you can play in the key of G. Starting in this position, you can play in the key of A major, starting here, and with a little bit of half-hole trickery. We're not going to dive into the details on exactly how to do that. I've got plenty of other videos on that. I'll link them over here, wherever they go. Feel free to check out that if you want some more details on that. We're just kind of talking concept. So I like to refer to those three scales as primary, secondary, and difficult. So in this case, primary, D, where you're playing a basic scale without really any modifications. You're just taking your fingers off the whistle. It's the most basic scale you could play on the whistle, at least in my opinion. The secondary scale, in this case, would be the key of G, where you substitute a C natural for a C sharp. So you have to think a little bit more, but not a whole lot more. The difficult scale, and again, apologies for the very simplistic terms here, but the difficult scale in this case is A major, where you can get there by half-holing that G sharp. So those are the three scales that you get in every whistle. This is how I like to think about it. You also get relative minors, but I kind of lump those in with the major scales because the only thing you're changing is where you start. So in an E minor scale, it's the same as a G major scale, starting from a different spot. Likewise, the B minor scale is the same as D major, just starting in a different spot. So not a whole lot of extra thought necessary to remember those minor scales. So that's how I kind of lump those. Primary, secondary, maybe we'll call it tertiary, or difficult, whatever you want to call it, the one that's going to involve a little bit more thought. Those are the three scales that you get with every whistle. So let's talk why. Why transpose? When should you transpose? When should you not? The answer to that really kind of depends on your goals. If you're looking to play Irish traditional music in a session environment, the answer to that is almost never. Because otherwise you're going to be playing by yourself. The rest of the session players are used to playing these tunes in certain keys, and if you start changing it, nobody's going to know that you're doing it or why you're doing it, because there's a reason that these tunes are played in the same standard keys. So if you're playing with a band, if you're playing with a couple of friends, and you just find it interesting, you just feel like mixing it up, by all means, change it. But that's one of those things that you're probably going to want to have to work out ahead of time. Can we play this tune in A? Well, fiddle players always want to play in A. Not entirely sure why that is. If you know why, feel free to comment down below, let me know. I assume it's something to do with the instrument, and it just fits better, whatever the case may be. Let's do an example tune. Here's the Boys of Malin, which can be played in D. Now, if our fiddle player friend says we got to play that in A, there's a couple of ways you can do that. The simplest option is to switch whistles. In this case, we've got an A whistle, so I don't have to do anything at all with my fingers, except for the fact that obviously the spacing is a little wider than the D whistle, but you get the idea. Same exact fingering. Exactly the same. So that's option one. Option two is to relearn the tune in the key of A by transposing and learning different fingerings. So back on the same D whistle, here's how we would do that in A. And off we go. That option is obviously a little more tricky because it does involve relearning the tune in the key of A. But it's a lot more flexible because it means you don't have to bring this other A whistle along with you to every session that you go to. It's a lot more versatile that way. But again, more work. Now the bonus is if you do relearn the fingering, learning how to play that in a different key, and you switch whistles, now you've got yet more versatility. Now you're in the key of E major if you were to switch to the A whistle. Now, okay, what do you buy next? That's the real question, I suppose. If you already have a D whistle and you've gotten a lot of enjoyment out of it, hopefully you've decided that you like playing this instrument, where do you go from there? You get another D whistle? Do you get a different key? My suggestion, and this is maybe a little bizarre, but the only one that I would recommend as your second choice would be an F whistle, because it's got a really pleasant tone, first of all. So it's very soft, it's very warm, and it's nice, especially if your ears are a little tired of the shrillness that you get from the upper octave of a standard D whistle. This is going to just sound delightful. Plus, it has the side effect of sort of stretching your hands out, or at least preparing your hands a little bit for something like the Irish flute or the uilleann pipes if you do want to progress into something other than just the whistle. Because you're not going to want to play something like this fingertip style like you would for the higher whistle. You want to play a bit more of a piper's grip, and that takes some getting used to, and it's kind of good practice, I think, to get your hands used to operating a slightly different way. Now, that being said, what you'll notice amongst all of this, actually, hang tight, let's go like this. Okay, these are all of the weird keyed whistles that I've got. These are all D whistles. And I've also given away probably at least that many more. So for me personally, I tend to acquire more D whistles. Obviously, some of these are better than others. Some of them are super basic, some of them are pretty high end. And most of them I hardly ever play. I tend to just play the one that you see all the time in the videos from Gary Humphrey. So again, D whistle is by far the most important thing to get right, I would say. Then feel free to jump into something else. Again, my recommendation is an F whistle just because I like the sound of it. This is the one that I practice on. It's the one that I'm first going to pick up, despite the fact that I almost never play it in front of anyone else. There's just not a huge call for it, except for one or two songs that I do in the band that I play in. So all of these are very, very seldomly used, these keys. That being said, if you need it, you need it. If you need to play an A flat, well, you're going to need an E flat whistle or an A flat whistle, I suppose. That's the only thing I ever use this thing for. So you can't do that in any other key. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I've answered some questions. Feel free to check out that infographic I got posted on my Patreon if you want to see more of a deep dive into what each one of these whistles can do, and also like if you need to play in a particular key, which whistle you're going to need. There's charts and whatnot. Let me know what y'all think. See you guys in the next one. Cheers.